Good evening, and welcome to the second episode of Orwell's Minutemen. We're back at it again, calling out authoritarian policies where we see them. I'm here with Lexington, and tonight we're going to talk about Ted Cruz.
We're going to talk about Ted Cruz.
Now, I'd like to preface this first by saying, tonight we're going to be talking about one of Ted Cruz's policies.
Yeah, we're not attacking Ted Cruz. We're attacking one of his policies that we have seen, and you know, it's the same way that we were talking about Donald Trump last episode,
yeah.
Right? We were attacking one of Donald Trump's policies, but more importantly, we were attacking the protesters.
Last week was all about the protesters.
But it's the same thing this week. We're not attacking Ted Cruz. We're attacking one of his policies that we have identified as authoritarian.
Yeah. So, before you start posting in the comments, you know, why are you bleeding heart liberals hating all over Ted Cruz? We're attacking one policy because I don't disagree with everything Ted Cruz says.
And we also attacked the liberals.
Oh, yeah.
Last episode,
we attack both sides.
We attack
equally.
authoritarianism.
Next week is going to be all about the regressive left because next week we're doing Canada, right?
Yeah, Canada.
Yeah, okay. All right. So yeah, watch out, regressive leftists. We're coming for you next. But first, Ted Cruz. This is kind of old news. I'm sure you've all heard about Ted Cruz's call for upped patrols in Muslim neighborhoods. But we thought we'd talk a little bit about it tonight. Here on CNN Politics, which will probably be up on the screen at some point, article reads, Ted Cruz on Tuesday called for law enforcement to step up their policing of Muslim neighborhoods in the U.S. in the wake of terrorist attacks in Brussels, comparing it to police boosting their presence in areas with known gang activity.
Now, before we continue, we want to specify that When Cruz first came out with this policy, he did not specify that it was being compared to gang activity. He just came out and said, we're going to police Muslim neighborhoods.
Yeah, when I first heard that, my reaction was one of petrification.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that sounds like a police state. But, you know, later on...
Isn't it a police state?
Well, I mean, yeah, when you say, well, we need to secure these neighborhoods, what does secure mean? How are you going to secure them with tanks?
Calling the National Guard.
I mean, but
they're reading the Quran.
And, you know, this is why I think it's good for us to cover things that are kind of old because it allows the facts to roll in.
Yeah.
So that way we don't get on the mic, you know, the evening of an event and be like, I can't believe this person said this.
Yeah, no, we don't want to jump on the hype train, right?
No,
we don't want to jump on the bandwagon. We want to take a nice, logical, and intelligent, factual look at these events as they occur, and not just, you know, spew names and slander.
There's plenty of that to go around.
There's tons of that. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, we try to keep away from that. So Ted Cruz has said, quote, if you have a neighborhood where there's a high level of gang activity, the way to prevent it is you increase the law enforcement's presence there and you target the gang members to get them off the streets. I'm talking about any area where there's a higher incidence of radical Islamic terrorism. Now, this leaves me with several questions still. First and foremost, this higher levels of radical Islamic terrorism thing, but he's talking about securing Muslim neighborhoods. And I'd be curious to know how many acts of terror take place in Muslim neighborhoods.
I'd imagine not a lot.
I mean, like, I tried to find some information on this, but you see, neighborhoods aren't very good targets. First off, I also tried to find statistics on like how many Muslim neighborhoods there are, and basically all I found was there are a couple Muslim majority towns in like Michigan.
Yeah,
I
remember those. Actually, you know, a small aside. I remember that there was I think it was in Michigan. There was a Muslim judge up there who basically ruled that, you know, this guy had wounded or killed his wife or something like that. I don't have a source for this. I just recall hearing this, and he said it was okay because of what they believe in. And so I'm not surprised
Sharia
that
law.
Sharia law. I'm not surprised that it was Michigan.
Yeah, well, that's all fine.
Of course, the judge came under fire because big time.
Yeah.
I don't even know if he's still a judge. But anyway, continue.
So, getting back on track here. This statement has drawn quite a bit of attention the world around. A lot of people have commented on it, have talked about how bad it is. One person being the New York Police Department Commissioner Bratton, he came out and said, quote, "We already patrol and secure Muslim neighborhoods the same way we patrol and secure other neighborhoods. But no, we do not single out any populace, black, white, yellow, or brown, for selective enforcement." Now, of course, Ted Cruz comes back and he says, well, most terrorists are Muslim, so doesn't it make sense to target Muslims for selective enforcement? Again, multiple questions arise in my mind around this.
And that also comes up to actually what we were
rebuttal.
talking about last week, where do you preemptively punish these people for something that they haven't committed?
Something they might do.
Something that they might do.
This all really rings of Japanese internment.
A little bit. A little bit.
But my first question is, so you up police patrols in Muslim neighborhoods. How does that present radicalization?
It doesn't, because radicalization isn't something that happens on the street like gang activity.
Gang activity, it's like, well, X number of people were shot in gang-related shootings. Okay, we know who we're going after. We know what's happening. But
I mean,
radicalization...
there's no statistic that says, X number of people became radicalized because of lack of police presence. No, that doesn't happen.
Here's my other question. Do you want to start collecting intelligence on that kind of thing? And now this is where things start to get really tricky. Because where do you draw the line? You say you want to secure these neighborhoods. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean house searches? Does that mean wiretaps? What does this mean? It's all very vague.
It's very vague.
Still.
Because it's not practical in any way. You
No.
can't patrol Muslim neighborhoods and successfully prevent radicalization, especially since if you patrol Muslim neighborhoods, the odds are you're actually encouraging radicalization.
And see, what we're doing by proposing something like this is we're playing right into ISIL's hands. Because now ISIS can sit back. They can point, if a policy like this were ever to become law, and say, look at the United States. Look at how they're singling out Muslims. Look at how they're treating Muslims differently. We're the other there. They are waging a war on Islam.
That's exactly what they want. They are waging a war of terror. They're trying to make us afraid to do these things to get more people committed to their cause. That's exactly what they're doing. And now Ted Cruz draws comparisons between this movement, or not this movement, his policy, and a successful program in New York implemented by Mayor Bloomberg, which, they use controversial surveillance efforts to, targeting Muslims under his administration? What is that about?
I believe that just means targeting Muslims while he was in office.
Okay. Well, pointing to this successful program is
Dubious.
It's very dubious because, first of all, that very program he's comparing to, or drawing comparisons to, is in New York, and New York Police Department Commissioner Bratton basically says, no, this is terrible.
Yeah. This successful program, which I'm really curious as to why this successful program doesn't have a name. I couldn't find a name for it anywhere. It was turned over by the current mayor of New York. I don't remember his name, de Blasio or something like that. Anyway, it's not really important. But there's talk that it never actually turned up any useful intelligence, that it wasn't actually that successful,
No.
and that's why it was discontinued. So I right now I'm discounting this piece of evidence, until such time as we can see, at least a name of this program and some proof as to how successful it was. But we were talking about how playing into ISIS's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to understand that ISIS is convinced and is trying to convince more people that the war they are waging is just, that the war they are waging is a jihad. Now, getting into semantics a bit, the word jihad is a household word in the United States anymore. You hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
ISIS jihadists, the jihad in the Middle East. In Islam, a jihad is defined as a war in defense of the faith.
Yep.
It's a justified war. So when Salah ad-Din raised an army to fight the Crusaders, 900 years ago, that was a jihad.
Because they were defending their faith.
They were under attack. They were defending themselves. It was justified. So I cringe every time I hear someone say, ISIS is full of jihadists. Al-Qaeda, they're jihadists. They're not jihadists.
They're not fighting a justified war.
There's actually a word for these types of people from Islam. What they are waging is called a hiraba, or a sinful war. The people who fight them are hirabites, or sinful warriors. So every time I hear them say, they're jihadists, this is a jihad, you are validating what they're doing.
Yeah, and Ted Cruz is validating what they're doing by putting forth a policy like this.
Yeah, because now they have more evidence to say the United States is waging a war on Islam.
And at that point, we probably are waging a war on Islam.
I mean, we're certainly treating Muslims differently. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we're treating criminals differently. We're treating innocent people who happen to be of the same faith as some bad people.
Yeah, and
differently.
So we're attacking the faith, and that makes their war a legitimate defense of their faith. I'm not saying that makes them the good guys, all right? Because they're not the good guys. But then we lose the good guy. Yeah, we lose legitimacy. We lose the good guy title if we do something like that, because now we are waging war against Islam, and that's not what we're doing. We're waging a war in defense of innocence, and this sort of policy is going to attack innocence.
Mm-hmm. And simply galvanize our enemies. Mm-hmm. Now, Ted Cruz has also said that we can't allow politically correct culture to hinder us from addressing problems with Islam. Now, I cannot agree with that statement more. I stand in staunch opposition to the politically correct culture where you can't criticize Islam or it's Islamophobia.
What did George Carlin say? Something along the lines of political correctness is authoritarianism pretending to be manners.
Yeah, or was it was fascism or
fascism, something like that. I can't remember the quote off the top of my head. It's censorship through and through.
And we see political correctness running rampant in Europe right now, and Europe is paying a hefty price for it. You're right. We cannot allow political correctness to hinder conversations about problems within Islam. But this is not political correctness.
No, this is bigotry.
No. I mean, defending the civil liberties of U.S. citizens is not political correctness.
The same way we shouldn't let political correctness stop us from talking about problems within Islam, we shouldn't allow bigotry to influence our policies in regards to Islam.
Certainly. And, not even necessarily bigotry, but just fear.
Fear, especially fear. That's the war that they're fighting.
I mean, look at the spate of terrorist attacks that have occurred over the last few months. I mean, Paris and Brussels being the big ones. Car bomb in Turkey. Okay, yes, terrorist attacks are happening at an unnerving rate, but we can't allow that fear to cloud our judgment and to lose sight of what we're fighting for in the first place.
Exactly.
Because we'll be the first to hound ISIS for being awful authoritarianism, and they certainly are. They are I think probably worse than the German Nazi Party. But we can't risk giving up our democracy, giving up our freedoms to combat them.
And that sort of gives us our segue to we can't give up our freedom for security, right?
Yeah, but this policy will make us safer, right? Sure, it'll trample on the civil liberties of a group of people, but if we can foil just one terrorist plot, that's worth it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, and there are arguments that this policy wouldn't even do anything, right?
Oh, certainly.
Because what are radicalization? Send police to go hunt radicalization? I mean, how do you do that? How do you hunt radicals, right? Because you can't. Until they do something, you can't. And so
you can put them on watch lists.
You can put them on watch lists. Yeah. That's fine, right? I mean,
of course.
Yeah.
I mean, buddy, we're on several watch lists. I mean, we're on several watch lists. But as we start to move into freedom versus security territory, we can't really discuss this problem without going all the way back to Thomas Hobbes, author of the Leviathan.
Thomas Hobbes is
one of the great political philosophers, English guy, and Hobbes.
Brit Bong.
Sure. And Hobbes created this idea of the state of nature, this state of nature, that humankind in their base form, in their natural habitat, live in a state of complete freedom, in that they have complete agency to do whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want. But they are not secure in the least, because you have no government, you have an anarchy, and there's nothing to stop, Tuk-Tuk over there from axing you in the head to steal your food.
Tuk-Tuk is not going to get punished for axing you in the head.
Tuk-Tuk is not going to get punished for axing you in the head.
No.
On the other end of the spectrum, you have complete security. And this is where you have sacrificed all of your freedoms to be completely secure. Like Dwight Eisenhower said, if you want complete security, go to prison.
Go to prison. Especially prison in Sweden, because it's very nice, I hear.
I would rather live in a prison in Sweden than in our dorm room here.
No, I
think the atmosphere would be better, and I think the company would be better.
Also, our dorm room doesn't have a sauna.
You're right, it doesn't.
Swedish prison.
Not only that, but we're not guaranteed food every day.
That is true. I haven't eaten dinner yet, and it's 10:50. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway, back to this idea. But I think that Hobbes' continuum is oversimplified.
Yes. Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Only a Sith deals in
right?
absolutes.
So on one side of the spectrum, you've got absolute freedom. However, you aren't free from theft. You aren't free from murder. You aren't free from all these other things.
We have to discuss what is freedom. Freedom is certainly agency to do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. But it is also the freedom from forcible coercion.
Yeah.
And Tuk-Tuk can axe you and steal your food. That's forcible coercion.
Yeah.
So in this state of complete freedom, heavy air quotes around that, you're not completely free because you can still be forcibly coerced. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're living under a totalitarian regime, are you really completely secure?
I mean, you are very secure. No one's gonna steal from you out of fear of the wrath of your government. But
gulags.
Yeah. But on the same spectrum, you're not free from the fear of you being disappeared.
Yeah, the government can make you disappear in the night. Yeah. Or, you accidentally speak out against the government and you're gone.
Yeah.
So we see that our so-called state of complete freedom is not completely free, and we see that our state of complete security is not completely secure. So we see that to have complete freedom, or to have a high degree of freedom, you have to have some degree of security. Mm-hmm. And to be secure, you have to have some degree of freedom. So there's no realistic, perfect state between the two. No. I mean, if you assume that we could build a totalitarian regime that is completely benevolent, then maybe you could argue for the complete security. But there's no such thing as a benevolent government.
Yeah, how many benevolent totalitarian governments have you heard of?
People are flawed. Governments are made of people. Therefore, governments are flawed.
So what you're saying is we need a robot.
Terminator comes to mind.
Terminator. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah, bad idea. So we see that it's not as cut and dry as Hobbes thought it was. So what we have to now ask ourselves is, where do we strike that balance between freedom and security? Because we know that we have to have both. And where that should land is, it's going to differ from person to person. Because there are certainly people out there who would say, it's perfectly fine if you want to take away some of my civil liberties to ensure my security. Me, on the other hand, I always will err on the side of freedom rather than security.
And the thing is, that person that's willing to give up their civil liberties for security, they're not also only giving away their civil liberties, they're giving away everyone's civil liberties.
Chances are they are moving to give away everyone, so that's when we come into conflict.
Yeah.
Now, in this particular scenario, we see the civil liberties of one group being in question. Now, you and I, as non-Muslims, I think it'd be really easy for us to sit back and say, well, it's not us. Secure in our neighborhood.
Yeah, so we're not. These people that are losing civil liberties, we're not losing civil liberties.
Yeah, it's
so why do we care?
But this is a very slippery slope.
Extremely slippery
going
slope.
back to that poem, first they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I was not a Jew, so on and so forth, until, then they came for me, and there was no one to speak up for me. Because conceivably, in the future, it will be our civil liberties on the line, and we have to decide, are we willing to sacrifice a certain group's civil liberties, but not our own?
That is a question I think we all need to ask ourselves before we propose something like this.
Yeah,
right?
What if in the future this was made about Christians, or black people, or white people, or gay people?
I would stand by every single group of those people without any hesitation.
Because, those homosexual terrorist groups are...
Oh, man, they're becoming a real problem.
It's a real problem. Mm-hmm.
They're so problematic.
We're coming for you, aggressives.
That's next week.
And from a policy standpoint, this balance of freedom versus security is always going to be fluctuating. Right now, the planet Earth is more peaceful than it's ever been before. It may not seem that way, but
that's just because we have instantaneous communication that gives us, an idea of what's going on over the world instantly.
Also, there's the fact that most people aren't dying violent deaths.
That too. Which, technology has come
and
a long way. Medicine.
Yeah. And so as we move into a safer world, that's just innately safer. It's not necessarily safer because we have implemented bigger governments and bigger, more powerful police forces. It's more of a cultural and an economic thing. More people have what they need, so I don't need to go axe tuk-tuk.
No, tuk-tuk already axed you, man.
Tuk-tuk can try. All right. So we can afford, more freedoms. But, of course, in times of economic strife, we see this like when Ferguson was torn apart by the riots and the city was essentially placed under martial law. Their civil liberties were removed from the picture for a brief period to ensure their security. But again, it's all a very, very personal decision that we have to think about, and we have to consider all of the factors that are involved.
Yeah, and those factors include foreign factors, domestic factors, and just personal factors. Everyone has a different opinion, as you stated earlier, about where does this balance fall. But in the case of those other factors, you have to take into consideration such as domestic. We don't live in an era of civil strife here in the United States. We have a relatively very peaceful existence here. We're pretty safe.
We have a great existence here. I don't care what people say.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. But we have to take into consideration foreign factors because of people like the Islamic State. We have to take them into consideration when we judge where this balance is. And so because of these factors that we're all taking into account, where that balance falls is all over the place.
Especially when we're fighting an enemy who isn't a conventional army.
Yeah.
We are fighting a group of terrorists. So we know their tactics are unconventional. Their tactics rely on deception and remaining very, very quiet to hit high-value targets.
Unpredictable. You never know where they're going to strike.
That's very hard to combat. And out of this fear of terrorism, of course, we got things like the Patriot Act, which I am personally not a fan of the Patriot Act, but I understand why it emerged. I understand why people were terrified after 9/11. It was our Pearl Harbor. It was our generation's Pearl Harbor.
Well, we were a little young when that happened.
I remember it.
I'm afraid that's outside of the scope of my memory.
I was at my grandparents' house, and I remember walking into their bedroom and seeing the newscast. And of course, back then I didn't have much of a recollection of what was, or much of an understanding of what was going on. But I do remember it.
I don't remember.
Obviously, I don't remember it well, but
I've been told the story that I was at preschool or whatever, and my mom went and got me and was like, okay, we need to get you out of here because something terrible just happened, and I don't actually remember it, but I have that story. So Maybe not our generation, but
Well, we're part of the millennial generation, and
suppose.
we're on the tail end of the millennial generation.
We're on the very...
So most of our generation is older than us. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
So basically the takeaway here is that we have to be careful when finding the proper balance of freedom and of security.
And that when we find that balance, we can't just hold on to it, right? Because of these other factors, that balance is constantly shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be willing to adapt. And in this case, this is not a good adaptation of no, this is not the direction we need to move in order to... It's just not... It's not good. This is not a good policy. This is a policy that just infringes upon a group's civil liberties, and we should stand up for their civil liberties, because these people aren't guilty of anything. They haven't done anything wrong, and yet we're sending the police after them to watch them. That's a police state.
And you always hear the old, well, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Yeah, you know who said that? Joseph Goebbels said that.
Joseph Goebbels.
If there's anyone out there who doesn't know who Joseph Goebbels is, he was Hitler's master of propaganda. So, just to put that little argument into perspective, a Nazi literally is the one who originally...
You're quoting a Nazi.
Yes.
Nazi, they're scum, right, Tom?
Yes, they are.
All right, so...
All right, well, that about does it for me. Anything else you want to cover?
I don't think so. Just, this is... Ted Cruz's policy is authoritarian, and quite frankly, I'm not surprised. I mean, Donald Trump endorses this.
Donald Trump endorses a lot of things.
Yeah. And you know who endorses Donald Trump?
David Duke.
Nazis, probably. You know. No, the KKK endorses Trump, and stuff like that. So no, this is authoritarian, right? We cannot ignore the fact that on the right, as we talked about this week, on the right there is authoritarianism. Ted Cruz is proposing authoritarianism, but on the left, we've still got a lot of authoritarianism.
It's arguably worse.
Yes.
It's arguably worse in that it's much more quiet and far more deceptive. But we will get to that next week.
Next week we're talking about the regressive left. We're talking about...
yeah.
Yeah, Canada, the capital of the regressive left.
Yeah, more specifically Toronto.
Oh, Toronto.
So, like, favorite, subscribe. That's what you're supposed to say at the end of a YouTube video, right?
I think so. That's what we said at the end of last one.
All right, well, there you go. Like, favorite, subscribe, comment, agree, disagree. Just keep things civil in the comments. That is if we get any comments.
We didn't last time.
I don't think we've gotten any comments on the last one.
We're very disappointed in all of you.
But, all two of you.
Yeah. Well, hey, we got 50 views.
Yeah, it's probably the same two people 25 times.
I did hit the F5 button a lot.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
All right. So, good night to you all, and come on back next week.
This has been Orwell's Minutemen signing out.
Godspeed.